My name is Tatsuya Ihara. I'm 38, and I'm a company manager by profession. Today is about my daughter. Universally, a father would sometimes be concerned about how to interact with their daughter, but my own is a little different from other children. As I mentioned, I'm a company manager, and I'm leading a somewhat successful career. I'm financially capable of securing a whole house near the center of the city. I met my wife when I was 30, and we married 2 years later. About a year after that, our daughter Minori was born. We both wanted a child, so we were overjoyed when she came into the world. At this point, we were at the peak of our happiness. However, a couple years later, we noticed that Minori was acting strange. Firstly, she was a very quiet, mature child, and she often played by herself at her kindergarten. Although she was quiet, she could communicate normally with other people. You heard her talk, you didn't think there was anything wrong with her. But just hearing her voice was a bit of a rare gem, you could say. But when she was focused on something, she wouldn't respond even if someone called her by her name. I suspected the worst and took her to a doctor just to be sure. That's when we found out that she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. It's an ailment that's classified as a form of autism, but it isn't a psychological problem. The individual can communicate normally, and it's not like she would never be able to study or work. From an outsider's point of view, she'd only seem like a person who's a bit strange. As you would probably guess, the strange comes in the form of persistent silence and no response when she's focused on something else. Although there aren't physical consequences, there's no doubt it's a disability. There may be some immense challenges that we can't even imagine awaiting our daughter in the future. Of course, I was still going to support her as much as I could. But my wife thought otherwise. She couldn't handle the huge responsibility of caring for a disabled child, and she filed for divorce before taking off soon after the diagnosis. I understood her reasons, and I signed the paper without much of an argument, but it left us both completely heartbroken.
Daddy, where's Mommy?
I'm so sorry, darling. It looks like we can't see Mommy for quite some time. She went somewhere far away.
When can I see Mommy? I want to see Mommy.
I'll tell you everything when you're older, darling. Think you can be a big girl and play the waiting game for a while? Daddy's here for you, always, until then, okay? I love you so much, Minori, and that's never going to change.
Okay, Daddy, I'm okay, see? There, now don't cry.
Oh? I'd never noticed I was crying until she told me I was. What with my daughter's condition, of course. But also that my wife ran away. Perhaps I was still struggling to process so much that had happened so suddenly. I had no doubt that the three of us would be happy as a family together. But my dearest wife ran out on us, and it became a life of a daughter living with her dad. Could I raise Minori well? Could I protect her? Truly? Such concerns had been tormenting my mind, even without my knowing about it. I dried my tears, and I hugged my dear Minori. Thank you, Minori. Daddy will do his best, okay?
Okay, thanks, Daddy.
I promise I'll make you the happiest girl in the world. I promise. And then we took a bath together, had dinner, and then I tucked her in for bed. After I knew she was asleep, I whispered in her ear, Daddy will never abandon you, darling. You hear me? I'll make sure you grow up to be a beautiful, wonderful lady. I swear I saw her smile in the dim light. Fast forward 7 years. Minori was 11 years old now, and normally she would be in grade 5. When she turned 7, I was faced with the decision of letting her go to school or not. I consulted a couple respected psychiatrists, and they explained to me that among the multiple kids of Asperger's, she fell in the isolated category, meaning she really enjoyed being alone. So I thought that she would actually be suffering through school life filled with children unlike her. In a worst-case scenario, she could be bullied, and a sad daughter is the last thing a sensible father wants. So I decided she would be homeschooled. This suited her well, and her academic prowess seemed to even surpass the normal average of her age group. I sent her to a bouldering school 3 times a week to ensure she got enough exercise. This individual sport that required concentration and determination seemed perfect for her, and she always seemed like she had fun with her training. Also, so that someone could take care of her while I was working, I hired a housekeeper, Mrs. Takeda. She's 50 years old, and a woman of incredible kindness, and she takes care of Minori as though she was her own granddaughter. A little side note about Mrs. Takeda. She makes the most amazing chocolate chip cookies. Gosh, just talking about it makes me want one so bad. In that manner, I left the housework to her, as well as the job of taking care of my daughter while I was at work. I spent time with Minori in the evenings after I got home, and on weekends. She especially liked going to the movie theater, and one day, a friend of mine wanted me to meet someone, and I was invited out to lunch. There, I was introduced to a woman named Kayoko. She was a beautiful woman of 30 years, and frankly, when it came to looks, she was right up my alley. Seems like my friend was concerned about me being single for far too long, and he'd brought a potential person to marry, although he didn't say that himself. Tatsuya here's been raising a child on his own ever since his first wife ran off. I'm not alone, dude. My housekeeper also takes a lot of the credit. Those were insane, dude. Too good to be true. But the fact remains, you're a single parent. It's good for your health to get out in the world and meet folks, you know?
You're raising your daughter into a wonderful woman all by yourself? That deserves so much respect.
Thank you very much. Indeed, things went very smoothly when we talked, and I wanted to get to know her more. But eventually, one starts to think about Minori. She wasn't a normal child after all, and I became worried about whether Kayoko would accept her. Make no mistake, it wasn't like I understood how to properly raise my daughter. It took a lot of time and a lot of mistakes. I had many hard times during her first growth spurt, and I thought it would be darn near impossible for a stranger to accept her for who she was.
Thank you very much for the other day. I had a lot of fun.
So did I. I must thank you too.
Can we meet again? I'd like to get to know you more.
My thoughts exactly, and I'd love to. I do want to see you again, but
But?
it's about my daughter, you see.
I know you have a daughter, Mr. Ihara.
What you don't know is that she has Asperger's syndrome. In other words, she's autistic. And there will be many instances where you'd notice she isn't like any normal child.
Oh, I see.
I must tell you that raising her as her father has been extremely difficult at times. Personally, if we do get together, it will be under the pretense of marriage in the end. But if accepting my daughter is too tall an order, well then, I'm afraid I have to say it's futile.
I don't mind at all. I'd like to meet your daughter, Mr. Ihara. Let's see how we are together, and then we think about the future in due time. What do you think?
Miss Kayoko, just as she seemed to me at first, seemed a kind, intelligent woman. She told me her wishes, and so I arranged for her to meet my daughter. At our age, we don't have very long to enjoy a nice relationship in any case.
Hello, Minori dear. I'm Kayako, and I'm so happy to meet you. I hope we can become good friends. Hello.
Minori was a girl of few words, but Miss Kayoko was so kind to her, I found Minori to be far less nervous than I imagined she would. She was really responsive towards Miss Kayoko's attempts at conversation, and seeing them interact so well made me think the future held lots of potential. Our dates would be usually at my place, and we decided to treasure our time together as a family. As usual, Minori spoke little, but I could tell that she admired Miss Kayoko. Loved her even, I dare say.
Hey, Dad. When is Miss Kayako coming back?
The day after tomorrow, dear. We were going to watch a movie together, right?
I want to watch the new Doraemon movie.
Got it. Then let's go to the movie theater, yeah? Little by little, Minori started to say that she wanted to meet Miss Kayoko more and more frequently, and we pretty much became a true family. After being together for a year, Miss Kayoko and I eventually married. However, soon after getting married, my job suddenly made me much busier, and my time at home became almost non-existent. It would be hard on Kayoko to take care of the house and Minori all on her own, so I kept Mrs. Takeda aboard 3 times a week. I was always concerned about Minori, of course. How are things with Minori? If there's anything you want help with...
It's all right. We're getting along just fine. Never you mind us. You just focus on your job, honey.
I know she can be difficult to handle. I was really relieved. I really felt like I could trust her. But then, 6 months after this life of ours went on... I just got on the train, honey. Did you find her?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I only took my eyes off of her for a second, but then she disappeared so quickly. Minori's never gone outside the house on her own up until now. She's never even liked going outside very much.
I know. Don't worry, Kayoko dear. I know you're always doing your best for Minori. It's not your fault.
Thank you, honey. I called the police and I'm still looking for her.
Don't blame yourself too much. We will find her very soon, you'll see. By the way, do you have any clue as to why she went out?
We were going about our day as we usually do. Anyway, I'm looking for her now, so let's talk later.
Thanks, dear. So much. Once I get to the station, I'll hop on a taxi home, okay? Let's rewind an hour. My wife called me while I was on a business trip. I answered my call and nearly dropped my phone because she screamed directly into my ear.
I'm so sorry! Minori's gone missing!
What? To my great shock, Minori had vanished from the house at this late hour. She wasn't in her room reading books as she usually does at this hour. She wasn't taking a bath or watching TV or gazing out at the sunset. I immediately ditched the business trip, hopped onto a bullet train last minute, and raced back home. Fortunately, police found her sitting alone in a nearby park not too long thereafter and brought her home safe and sound. Minori!
Dad?
I quickly tackled her in a hug. Her shoulders were shaking, and I could tell she was still on the verge of crying. My daughter is one of few words, but she can convey what she's feeling absolutely no problem, and all I could sense from her in that moment was fear. And as her father, I was heartbroken. I asked her, "Why in the world did you go outside on your own? You know you shouldn't do that, honey." And she answered quietly,
Kayako told me to get out.
"There's no way." Minori always took what she was told literally, so perhaps she simply walked out when she was told to get out of the house. I interrogated my wife. "Why did you tell Minori to get out of the house?"
I'm so sorry. We got into a quarrel over something small, and in the heat of the moment, I lost my temper. I'm so sorry.
She cried as she apologized. I thought about it and realized I had some responsibility too for leaving her alone with Minori too often. Raising a child is done by two parents, not one. I should know of all people. I also left you in charge of her too often. I'll arrange things with my job and make sure to spend more time with her and with you. So please, be patient with her and never lose your temper. For better or for worse, Minori always takes things literally, you see?
I understand, and I promise.
Thank goodness it wasn't something worse than getting out of the house. We were able to talk things over, and I believed this whole fiasco had come to a nice close. However, a few days later...
Excuse me, Mr. Tatsuya, I just heard that Minori had gone out of the house a few days ago.
You heard right. I was so scared. Seems like she got into a quarrel with Kayoko.
Is that so? Truthfully, there's something that's been on my mind, and I've been wondering if I should tell you or not.
What is it? Feel free to tell me anything.
A while ago, I went back to your house after I left, during the night. I'd forgotten something, you see. I was about to ring the doorbell when I heard the most ferocious yells coming from Miss Kayako.
Yelling? Kayoko was yelling? What kind of yelling?
Yes, she was. They sounded furious, like Minori had ruined her favorite dress or something. And along with that, sir, the sounds of breaking glass.
Oh my god, are you sure you heard all this? I hope you're mistaken, Mrs. Takeda.
I'm afraid I heard everything loud and clear, sir. But I merely thought that her scolding had gone overboard just that one time, and I went home without paying it much attention. But then I heard about the little angel leaving the house, and I started to assume the worst.
What she told me was truly shocking and inconceivably scary. Kayoko told me herself she was getting along fine with Minori. Above all else, I couldn't imagine my wife throwing a temper tantrum and yelling like that. Not to mention the breaking of glass. If I didn't take action here, Minori could wind up seriously injured, or perhaps worse. Oh God, perish the thought. Please. I'm ashamed to admit that during those busy times, I was never at home anymore. And even if the windows had been changed, I wouldn't have noticed. Even now, I never had the slightest clue that the windows were ever broken. My gut screamed at me saying that this was pretty dire, so I made some time to be with Minori alone, and I asked her this. How are you and Kayoko living at the house these days? And Minori, little by little, started to tell me everything. First of all, whenever Mrs. Takeda wasn't working at the house, Kayoko acted like my daughter didn't even exist. Even when Minori asked her for favors, which she needed to do because of her ailment, she ignored every single one. On days Mrs. Takeda wasn't around, she wouldn't even prepare lunch for her. Second, when I would be away a night or two because of work, there were times when she would completely abandon Minori and go off gallivanting in town. And third, she would sometimes verbally abuse her and occasionally throw things at her. Well, that explains the broken glass that my housekeeper was talking about. I went pale as soon as she finished telling me everything. The reason was simple. I knew for certain that Minori was telling the truth, through and through. You see, while people diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome could seem normally intellectually, they lack the ability to fabricate stories, and telling lies is a genetic impossibility for them. For better or for worse, she cannot lie, and overtly states exactly what is on her mind. That's why it's always been a concern of mine that she often had quarrels with people because of this. She would never refrain from stating her opinion on someone, and normal people would naturally get offended. But I thought Kayoko was different. I'd foolishly accepted her excuses and never noticed my own daughter's silent cries for help. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, darling. I never thought. I'm so sorry. I hugged her tight and told her I was sorry countless times, crying into her shirt. I couldn't believe I'd let my job take me away from my daughter and left me alone with that monster. But why didn't you tell me, honey? Of course I would have helped you if you'd said something.
Miss Kiara told me that I wasn't supposed to tell you, Daddy. She said that she'd hurt me if I did. I don't like getting hurt.
Anyone could assume she hadn't a clue how terrible that really was. She just did what Kayoko told her. If Kayoko would throw things at her without thinking twice... Oh God, please, stop! Pure, raw anger boiled up from deep within me, and I quickly confronted Kayoko. At first, she feigned ignorance, but as I asked more questions, she exploded into a demon, showing her true, malicious colors.
You can't blame me. The child is weird. You can't deny that. She doesn't speak well, nor does she know what she's thinking. It's disgusting. She sometimes insults me to my face and how I want to treat her. And how I treat her is her reward for not showing me respect.
I know I told you about my daughter's condition when we started dating, and you said you were alright with it, didn't you? She doesn't understand she's disrespecting people when she says hurtful things. If you can't accept her for who she is, then you're not welcome here anymore.
Gladly. And I'll make sure you divide your estate, big and bulky.
At the very end, it all came down to money. Forgive my language, but what a whore! What a stupid, heartless gold digger! And I hope she burns bright in the pit of hell! I was now convinced that what she was after all along. My money. I truly have poor taste in women. I truly do. I completely trusted what lay on the surface and married someone after just a year. That was my biggest mistake. Truthfully, I should have known that Minori growing attached to her doesn't show who she truly is either. All things considered, in retrospect, I was also getting lonely with raising a child alone, and in a desperate attempt to have some burdens be lifted from my shoulders, I'd hastily found a partner. Minori dear, I'm going to divorce Kayoko. That means we're not going to be a family anymore. It looks like your mother's going to leave you again. Are you alright with that?
I'll be okay if you and Mrs. Takeda are here with me, Daddy. I don't like Mrs. Kayako anymore. She was a scary woman, and I don't want her around to make us unhappy.
Even without so many words, I quickly realized how hopeless she'd become regarding Kayoko. I only felt shame for myself. So much shame. Soon thereafter, Kayoko packed up her stuff and left the house. However, I wasn't going to adhere to what she wanted. Truth be told, not only did Mrs. Takeda suspect child abuse on Kayoko's part, but she provided so much more additional information.
This is what I found when I was cleaning out the ladies' room, Mr. Tatsuya. All of them are expensive pieces of fashion. Forgive me, but I don't believe she can afford such clothes from her allowance. Perhaps it would be wiser to investigate her personal affairs before you go along with the divorce.
Thank you. What would I do without you? Perfect example of the housekeeper knows things you don't want them to. She'd noticed that Kayoko would wear these expensive clothes only during times I wasn't around. Perhaps this is what they call a woman's intuition, but she apparently sensed something was amiss, considering this strange behavior, and she was waiting for the right moment to tell me. I hired a famous lawyer, and we put together a divorce trial. After I told him all of what Mrs. Takeda told me, he said investigations would begin promptly. As a result, it was found that Kayoko had been stealing money from what I saved up for Minori's future and used it on expensive purses and clothes. Although we were family once, she was found guilty of relative larceny. Evidently, her dreams of claiming a portion of my estate were shattered. Furthermore, based on the fact that she was neglecting my daughter, we succeeded in getting her to pay compensation in damages and to reimburse us the money she used to buy those things. The total amounted to 8 million. I firmly declined the offer of divided payments and made her pay in full, plunging her into debt. She contacted her parents for financial assistance, but most of it came from consumer finances. It may be difficult for a woman over 30 to pay such a sum alone, but I don't care. 8 million doesn't even begin to pay for the crimes she committed when she not only broke my heart, but also when she put Minori in danger. Any parent would understand that someone doing something terrible to them wouldn't be much of a problem. But if someone messed with their child, that person would suffer their full-blown, merciless wrath. In the end, I became a single father yet again. My friend, who'd originally introduced me to Kayoko, apologized to me. "I'm so sorry to have introduced you to such a monstrous woman." But everyone can see it wasn't his fault at all. He was also fooled by her superficial charms. And it was completely my fault for not realizing Kayoko's ill intentions until after it was too late. Meanwhile, Minori herself doesn't seem too grieved over what happened. Thank goodness. My only happiness is to see you grow up to be big and strong. All this with Kayoko made me realize how much I mean it when I say this to you. You're my only family, Minori. Daddy has to see you be happy all the time now, don't I? I love you. So much. Which means I'm probably never going to marry again. In any case, the golden age of 40 is just around the corner. By the time Minori is fully grown, I'll be in my 50s. But before that, there's something I have to do first, and that would be to initiate a disabled employees division in my company. Minori isn't too competent interacting with people, but her study skills are average. No, what am I saying? She's genuinely better than that. A good working environment would ensure her getting a good job, I suspect. Above all, folks like Minori, who have no choice but to give up work because of physical and or intellectual disabilities, are not scarce in society. My calling, because I am a father to a disabled daughter, is to create healthy working environments for such people, to give them a chance to contribute to society, and to give them the happy lives they hope to achieve.